welcome everyone to our first podcast episode. And this is finally happening after, I don't know, we've been planning this for about a month now, and we did some testing and everything. So, welcome everyone. And today we have, and this podcast is Borders. That's the title we have chosen. And today we have Moniz from Colorado, uh, Utsav from California, and Umit also from Colorado, and I am from East Coast, and my name is Biswas, by the way. I I shouldn't forget to say that. And so
Hi,
Hello.
hello, hello.
Hi everyone.
Hi.
Let me talk a little bit about like what this podcast is all about. So basically, we are all friends from high school, and we always in Viber, which is one of the, I guess, the most popular web app that we have. That's popular in Nepal, I guess. So we've been talking and having these a lot of conversation about many different topics around the world in Nepal, and uh, and we thought that having that conversation out in the world, that would make it interesting for other people, and the people may have, we may have something to contribute in those topics. So the yeah, so this podcast came about from that. And so basically we'll be talking about different topics. There's no any particular topic that we may not cover. Actually, one of our group chat name was St. James group without any topic, something I forgot now. See, so this is our first time, so I may misspeak and all that, and I'm sure it'll happen to all of my friends as well. So for today, we have chosen a topic that we have been discussing in that group, identity. So basically, we want to learn, or we want to discuss in this podcast, that what identity means to us, and how we see ourselves, and all that stuff. And basically, we want to talk also about, since we are all football fans here, soccer fans here, so we also want to talk about how we, our football identity. So basically, how we chose our team, and why we are loyal to these teams, even though we are not living in the city or the country. And also the main, and one of the most important things here that we want to discuss is, we see, I'm sure we all agree on this, that we see that there is rise of identity politics around the world, and we want to discuss a little bit about why that is on the rise now. So before we go on to all those topics, I want to just go around and start with what identity means to us, as well as how we see ourselves, like what kind of identity that you see yourself as. So I just want to put it out there, and anybody can jump in if you want.
So I can go first. So hi everyone. If you're listening, then my name is Amit, and we are glad that you're listening to us. About my identity, I keep thinking about my Instagram page because that's where like I put my like, oh, like I'm a dad, I'm a professor, I'm a gooner. So that's what I'm thinking about right now. In terms of an identity, obviously being in the U.S. from Nepal, right? So I came to the US probably about 20 years ago now. It's been 2 decades. And that's one of my identity is like, an immigrant, right? And that's where I see myself in the current context, outside of my immediate social circle, right? Inside my social circle within my family, I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I'm a friend, and really an Arsenal fan, right? Because that's the goal that we're talking about today is football identity. So I see myself as an Arsenal fan, and in a sense, over the years, it has become a part of my identity. When anybody asks me, right, who are you? I naturally tend to say, oh, like I do this for a living, but then also one of my hobbies is watching soccer, and then I'm an Arsenal fan. So it's been a natural tendency to kind of subscribe to Arsenal, over the years. So that's who I am. But that's where I'm gonna leave and let others chime in.
Yeah, I'm gonna start. I mean, identity. Hi, everyone. My name is Manish. I'm also from Colorado, and thanks for everyone for being here. early morning, even though it's Sunday weekends. Some of us are dads, so it's pretty tough. But identity is kind of like a interesting subject. As Biswas was talking about identity, and I was thinking about it, I've seen in myself like how I have changed over the years. And I'm just going to answer it a little differently because like identity for me has progressed as things around me has changed. So like growing up like in Nepal up until like 15 or 20 years, the identity was like core associated with being from Nepal. And once you came over here for school, your identity kind of changed, because it was more focusing on schoolwork and from that regards, and like it was kind of work. So like I'm going through that process of going through the mixed identity as I've grown over the years. Like from a more larger context or broader context, there are still things that I closely associate with, like Umit and Utsav. I'm fellow Arsenal fan, so that's been like a core since I was like 16 or 17 years old. That has been part of me. But there are other aspects of life that have kind of changed over the years as I've transitioned myself and figured myself out. And also like since the world is so broader these days, i I try to think of like like all of us are like since coming from a different country and settling in US as a like a more of a global citizen. But again, the world is kind of transitioning from global to like more like local, because of the geopolitics situation. But nonetheless, from that regards, I do think, like I maybe try to think of myself as a global citizen, but not sure like from to what context. So with that, I'm gonna ask Utsav to chime in.
Hello everyone. Yeah, this is Utsav from Los Angeles. Welcome to our first podcast. Um, yeah, like identity. I did not even think about identity, like other than us kind of trying to like when trying to decide the topic for our first podcast. We eventually ended up with this particular topic. But like in terms of just thinking about, who am I really didn't do that as much consciously over the years. Obviously, we do that, just because it's something common to do, right? Like when you're asked, about yourself, we always say, okay, my name is so and I do this for a living, and I'm from here, right? So for the largest part, I used to identify obviously as an immigrant come who came from Nepal, right? But these days, even saying that I am from Nepal feels a little bit fake to me, just because I'm really not a true Nepali anymore. Because after coming here and like almost living more than like it feels like I've lived there more than I lived in Nepal now. So like my identity, especially of where I am from, has changed, right? And kind of being in different parts of America as well, you know that has changed. So it feels like my identity is kind of evolving over time.
Yep.
uh, Obviously, I like I identify as like a husband or a friend, or dad, recently, right, for the last 2 years, which is probably at the forefront of everything. Work has been at at the forefront of my identity for the largest part, because us coming into US, going through our college life, and then after that, it has been all about our career, right? So like there has been tremendous, like my like all my priority has always been career. It's always like number one or two. So a big part of my identity as I see myself has been about what I do. Um, so yeah, I guess in a similar vein, I guess we always try to like when we think about who I am, it tends to be like we associate to a certain group, right? Like whether we are male or a nation or like a work group, um, we always tend to do that. Maybe it's inherent in us, or maybe that's how our society is. Um, and eventually, I guess, even in terms of my support for Arsenal, right? Like us being from Nepal, living in US, somehow we follow EPL and we follow a certain club, and we are loyal to that club for some reason. So I do identify as a Gunner, an Arsenal fan since
I didn't know it was Gunner. I always thought it was Gunners.
No, Gunnar, I think
well,
is
the
English, right? Or-
no, no, no. I think the team is called the Gunners, but
Okay.
the fans themselves identify as Gunners.
Gooners,
It's
yeah.
kind of
Oh,
it's
okay.
yeah, it's a nickname. I've been following the team since late 90s, so it's been a while. Um,
yeah, I
but
think
yeah, that's definitely a big part of my identity, and especially these days or the last few years when we began this group and we've been following EPL and playing fantasy religiously for the last 6 or 7 years, that has even grown more.
yeah, I think all of
Yeah,
us,
I mean,
all of us kind.
so
I was just gonna add, like all of
yeah, yeah,
us.
go ahead.
I think all of us are like got more associated to soccer post 98, 97. That's when like 98 World Cup in France. That's when we were really.
No, for me, it was the 1990. For me, that's when I associate. I mean, that's when I started actually. I remember. I must have watched maybe in 86, but I don't think so. But 90 final, I remember
No, I
clearly
mean,
that game.
like
And
Is
since
that
then,
the
I've been
Germany?
watching World Cup.
yeah,
Yeah,
Germany versus
Germany
Argentina
winning.
yeah,
versus Germany. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
And then that's what got me into Argentina also.
but
That's
up
that's
until
the game, or that's
94,
the
right? 94 and 90, we were like fifth grade. We were pretty
yeah,
young.
94 fourth grade.
Like after 98, that's when we were kind of exploring our passion, right? Like we were playing sports more religiously. We were like associating with our band, music and all that, right? That's when we were. Maybe some of us were starting young, but for me, it was like around that time, 97,
Okay.
98.
I
Okay.
think we got exposed to football pretty early in Nepal because it was World Cup, right? And everybody watched, like it's like a ceremony, like everybody sits together, watches World Cup. And that's how it was. Like, you see it on the paper, you see it on TV. Like even Nepal TV used to broadcast, right? They would not broadcast anything else, but like World
Yeah,
Cup is a big thing. And then I remember like even my dad, who's not a big soccer fan, like he'd be like, oh, like we gotta watch soccer tonight, right? And everything changes accordingly. Your time, your routine, everything kind of caters to that. Saying, oh, like we get, like it's the match tonight, so we're gonna watch that.
So
So
now
I
I
think
feel like I'm warming up now. So, so I was listening to you guys about like how you describe yourself and what you would say about identity. And then for the first few lines, when I was speaking earlier, I was like totally nervous, I guess. So, anyways, now I feel like after listening to you guys, I feel like I never like to identify myself as anything because for the longest time for me, whenever I said, I mean, this is something I guess I also had a misconception of an identity, like what who I am could be
Hmm.
just should be just one thing, but it couldn't be many things. And since as a kid, whenever somebody asked me who am I, then I always try to not answer that question because I felt if I say this is who I am or this is what I do, then I felt like people put me in a bucket, and I always avoided that. I tried to avoid that, but then recently once I understood about, I actually after reading this book from Amartya Sen, I think it's Identity and Violence, where he describes that the reason. So the book is about why people fight because of certain identity, or that's because we tend to associate ourselves with just one identity versus who we are. Like you all describe yourself as dad, you all describe yourself as Arsenal, and like Utsav said, for me also for the longest time, I also thought my identity is what I do. right? So if I was in school, then I was a student. If I was working, then it's the position that I am in, that's my identity. Or so if I am studying physics, then I'm a physicist. And I hated it during college or growing up, that when I used to study, like I'm sure we all did, and I used to get first, second in school, and so I was always considered a nerd, and nobody wanted to talk about me, at least in my neighborhood. Nobody wanted to listen to me about anything other than studies. Okay, if it is about say fashion or sports or something else, nobody cared what I thought, and I hated that. And I guess that's where it came from, maybe,
No,
that I
yeah. I mean,
never wanted to identify
it's kind
myself
of
as something,
it's kind of like
one
a
thing.
misconception, right? That we grew up in Nepal, because if you're like good at one thing, then people like to typecast. It's just a cultural thing.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
I mean, I myself, like I was saying earlier, like through the ages, like it's just transitioning. Maybe I'm a chameleon by nature. I don't know. I mean, I'm just saying, like the identity is very hard, and I'm of a similar mindset as you, Biswas. I don't want to be typecasted as one thing. I mean, people transition over
yeah.
the years, like during 17 and 80s, our value system, our belief system, it changes over time. So we cannot be associated. I mean, we might be good at our work or what we're doing, but that's not the end of our work. After like 4 or 5 years, we might not like it anymore, and we might transition into something else. So how can we?
And I liked what you said. I had never thought about it in that way, that my identity changed over time. When you said it, I was like, oh, yeah, that's something happens to all of us, I guess, that we are something like, say, when we were in school, we were student, college, we were student, now we're working, now we have son and daughter, so we are father and whatnot. But I had never thought about it in that way, that our identity changes over time. That's a good point,
Yeah,
actually.
that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And I'm glad Manish brought that up. With like your identity changes across time, but also right, like where you work, who's your inner circle. I think that dictates a lot too. Um, and a funny thing was that it's a funny story because I was at a gathering, like it was a couple of years ago, and somebody introduced to me their children as like, "Oh, this is Umit uncle," and I was like, "Wait, like I'm an uncle now?" Because like for the longest time, right? Like
Yeah, a
we
new
always,
identity.
yeah, it's like you had certain vision, right, of like an uncle, and I was just like, "Oh man, like now I am
My
that
vision of
uncle."
uncle is one
I'm
with a
that person.
mustache.
Yeah, yeah, right. Like kind of older, and I'm like, oh crap, like okay, I'm an
Yeah,
uncle now, right?
Yeah,
yeah.
So that was like, oh, okay now. So yeah, so I just wanted to share that because I didn't even realize, and then I think that gets to the other point is that we have the identity that we subscribe to, but then there's also like a perceived identity, right?
yeah,
Like how others view
yep,
you and
Hmm,
have
hmm.
that thing. So maybe that's something we want to explore now or maybe later. But
yeah.
that's something that I
I
wanted
just
to
want
bring
to add.
in.
So yeah, yeah, that's a good topic. I mean, good question. Like, so what is our identity then? Is it the identity that we think is our identity, or what others perceive us as
I
an
mean,
identity?
here's the thing, right? If you're an actor or you're a public face, then it's gonna matter what other perceive. Like for someone like us, I mean, I'm more of a carefree person. I don't care like if somebody else thinks about me differently. And I've over the years, the way I talk, people kind of tend to think like I get angry. It might be my nature, but I'm not angry at that person, but just the way other people perceive me, it's like I'm rude or uh, I sound differently. And for the most time, whenever I'm speaking with my coworkers or American friends, I don't have that issue. But when I'm dealing with like people of my same origin, like Nepal, they tend to think of me as like rude or or always get mad, and I'm fine with that. It's their perception, and I tell them that's not what I'm trying to say or do. But if other people think about me that way, I try to clear as much as possible. But I can't help or change them, based on what they think about me, and so I just let it be. And
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
mean,
I mean, but like, how can you say that, right? Like, how can you say that you don't care about what other people think of you or your identity? Because isn't identity more like you are a man? Like, how is someone going to question that? Or like you associate yourself to like, oh, you do this, and maybe you believe this, right? Why do you think that other people would think any differently, and like, why wouldn't you
Oh no,
care,
no. I
right?
was
Like,
I was
is it?
I was saying more from like the way I speak. I think you're talking more from different perspective. I was just
Mhm.
generalizing. From the way I speak, the tone of my voice, from that
Yeah.
regards. And
But then,
I mean,
what Utsav said, if we do, I mean, if we care about what other people see us, then that's, I mean, what got into my, I mean, what I started thinking about are the transgenders or the people who think inside
Hmm.
they are women or men, but then outside, the whole world sees them as something else, like what you born with in terms of gender. So I think it matters more for them, at least. If you Otherwise this wouldn't be an issue. So for them it is, what they think of themselves is what their identity is in terms of gender, in
Hmm.
this case.
Hmm.
But the outside world views uh, them as something else. But then at the same time, this is the question I think they are
no.
also debating
So
now. Who is like, is the identity that they themselves call, I
because
mean, they themselves think of
I wanna
themselves,
add one
is
thing.
their identity, or is the world views of them as whatever gender it is their identity? I think there's a big debate. That's what the fight is about.
No, no,
If I,
no,
if
no, no.
I,
So hear me out, right? Identity can be, even though we have transgender, he, she, they, all of us, right? To me, it depends on, and this is again my thinking. To me, it depends on like what kind of person you are. If you're like introvert, extrovert, you're mellow.
Hmm.
If someone is mellow or like too chill or carefree, they can also be transgender, and they don't really care about like what. It depends on the type of the person you are. If someone is pretty vocal by nature, for them it matters. But someone who's a little carefree, it's just gonna.
how do you know if they are vocal and it matters? If it doesn't, if they're not vocal, it
No, no, no.
doesn't
I
matter.
think
It
that's
may
your
matter, but it's just that they are not vocal.
no.
They're not
Yeah, no, no.
like saying it.
I think it's more about what I said earlier, right? Like that's how you're perceiving them to be vocal, right? That's your perception of their
Exactly.
identity. And the more I think about it, like our identity, now I'm thinking about it, it feels like a struggle, right? Like how you want to be, how
Yes.
you want to
Hmm.
how you want to project yourself to the world and how you're being perceived, right? And and I don't want to get too sociological here, but there is a theory, and for our listeners,
Man, you should
I
go ahead. You
always
should go
Yeah,
ahead.
you should
I
actually.
mean,
right, I
That's why
always
we are
talk
all
about.
here.
So there is a
I'm interested to listen from Professor Umit about his theory. I'm interested.
so
Yeah.
okay, so
Yeah, I'm
this
interested.
disclaimer, it's not my theory, but it's something that we learn in sociology. It's called Looking Glass Self. It's by Charles Cooley, and what Cooley basically says is that when we basically try to portray ourselves, and then depending on how others react to it, what their reaction to it, like our role, we tend to sort of fit accordingly to people's reaction, right? Like
Yeah.
you constantly kind of look at it, and that's why it's called looking glass. Is you're looking at sort of in the mirror and you're kind of adjusting. And then there's another theory by Irving Goffman. It's called, uh, it's basically like Shakespearean thing. Like the world is a stage, and you sort of act. So so we all are acting in a sense, right? So this would be our front stage, and our backstage is where we practice. So think about it like the podcast, the recording is our front stage, and the
Hmm.
backstage is all the preparation we have done, which is very private. You don't show the world what you practice, right? So in terms of that, when you are talking about yourself or you're trying to identify yourself, I think that there's this constant struggle. Is that, oh, like this is who I am, but then simultaneously is like, oh, am I being accepted, or how am I being perceived? So I think there's that constant struggle there. So I just wanted to add
Okay,
that.
so we are all chameleon. That's what I said earlier, right?
I think so. I think so. I mean, no matter, I mean, even Manish, when you say, oh, like, I don't care, like, right, when I'm talking to folks from Nepal and they call me rude, I think you do care. That's why you're bringing it up in this
Yeah, no, no,
podcast,
yeah,
right? So,
you're right. I'm just saying, like, that's the perception, and whatever you said
yep.
was absolutely right. I do care, but where I was going with that is like when I speak with Americans, or I don't have that issue, uh, and that's all. But I mean, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah,
No, I mean it's okay. Like if you think like that, that's fine. So Utsav mentioned something about uncle. I just wanted to say this because for me also, while I was growing up, when I never thought I would like the word kaka. Kaka is uncle in Nepali, and I had thought about this as a kid that I'll not be called kaka ever. Okay,
Mhm.
but once I had my nephews, and when they started calling me Bisu Kaka, that word Kaka became something else. Now is I mean, I love to hear that whenever they say it. So I just wanted to say that. So speaking of now, we kind of like, discussed a lot about what identity means to us, and we even went on to talk about like identity can change over time. So I just wanted to now briefly this is one of the interesting topics. So for me I don't have any club football identity. So you guys introduce yourself as Arsenal fan, and we know that I mean, many of our friends are Liverpool fans, and then some are Barca fans. But for me, I don't have any club in that sense. And I started like saying that I follow or I root for the clubs that are winning, and which I say is a very American way. And then so I just wanted to ask you guys, so even if we don't live in that country and we're not from that city, like how do you came about, about that loyalty that you have, like you call yourself, and I heard from all three of you that you mentioned that one big part of your identity is Gooners, which is not insignificant. That's like you're saying it as it's very significant that you are Gooners. I didn't know that actually until now, that you identify yourself like that's one of your big part of your identity. So I just wanted to go around, and yeah, anybody can talk if you want, like why you are a Gooner
yeah.
or what made you a
I
Gooner
think
and what
The
brings that
most
loyalty
most
to you.
loyal fans in the world, Gooners.
I think we kind of answered, right. It's if you listen to all of us, it was around 97, 98. I think post
Yeah.
98
So that's
France.
how it started. But then, like, why? Like, you talked as if it's in your blood that you are
Yeah,
Gooners.
because
You know.
because
No,
because we have been
I
supporting
mean,
since 97, 98, and we got associated. And like where I was going was, it was during that time we were like teenagers. That's when you like 14, 15, you listen to a band, you get associated it to. Similarly, at least for me, it was like associated to Arsenal was during that time. And I'm not gonna lie, that was the time I listened to Brian Adams and Backstreet Boys. That's like my first, time getting associated with like American music. Obviously, I didn't didn't get associated or identified with that music throughout the rest of my life, but like for some reason Arsenal did, and it was like following rigorously through the years from 97, 98. And I think that is part of the reason and culture, because you get associated, you get invested, and once you pour your emotions into it, I
Hmm.
think that is part of the reason. That's how I got associated with Arsenal, and I don't know how it happened. It just happened, because maybe because they were the second best team to Man United during that time, and you always. I'm naturally a person who doesn't like someone always on the top, so maybe that could be the reason. And also, like, Dennis Bergkamp was one of the my favorite player, and he was playing at Arsenal then. That's how I got associated.
Mm. So it's the
yeah,
emotion
as
and the time then.
yeah, I mean, I was actually trying to think through for this podcast, like how did I start like supporting Arsenal? And I think, I mean, the time frame is similar to Manish, right? Like when I also started following Arsenal around that time, because I think like in the 90s, early 90s, it was all about World Cup. We didn't really get as much club football, and
No,
EPL
we
only
didn't.
started.
Yeah.
Yeah, EPL
Yeah.
kind of started in 1992, right? I think we used to get more football from AC Milan, Inter Milan, like in the Serie
Yes.
A than even EPL.
Yeah.
EPL
Hmm.
actually started, I think, for us, kind of started
Yeah.
towards the late 90s.
Yep.
The
Yep.
David Beckham and everything kind of got really popular, right?
Mm.
And I think that's when I started watching, and like I was actually trying to understand like why we try to find a team, right? Like whenever we're
Mhm.
watching sports, we try to find a team to support. Somehow we need a team. It's just like you just don't watch a sport event and not support someone, right? You have to support
Mhm.
someone so that there is some consequence to winning or losing. Otherwise, you're always neutral, and it's just, I don't know, it just is not as much fun. So maybe it's inherent in that when we're watching sports and it's like we're trying to find a team. For me, I think during that time, Arsenal, right, was definitely like first, second. And Man U used to be the big team back then, but like we also won like in a few Premier Leagues. But I think for me the differentiating factor, as I was trying to think, was just the type of football
Oh
we played,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like it was considered like the Barcelona type of football, that what the tiki taka that
Yeah.
eventually became popular with Messi. Back then, like Arsene Wenger was known for like bringing that kind of football to EPL, and it was actually like really nice to watch. Like when you watch the game, it was not just about winning, but it was like the style of play. And I think that definitely like attracted many people, like including me. Which kind of brings the question of like why do we try to associate ourselves to certain teams, right? It's I think ultimately it's about like, do you see yourself like, and do your values align with the team, right? And like if I think like maybe my values were that I want attractive football. I don't care about winning. Yes, I do care about winning because ultimately I chose like the first or second team. I was not watching the 19th or the 20th team, right? Because we are not from England, right? We're watching in Nepal, and obviously we get games that are more popular, which are usually the top five teams. So from there, like when we had to choose, like I chose a team that was playing attractive football for me at that time, despite Dennis Bergkamp, who I didn't like actually because of because of 1998 World Cup, when I'm an Argentina fan, another identity, right? Like somehow I
Yeah.
ended up, or most of us in Nepal ended up being Argentina fans because of Diego Maradona. 1998 World Cup was like a heartbreak for us because of Dennis Bergkamp and that ridiculous goal that he scored. So I didn't like him, but still, like he was in Arsenal. Like he was, even though I didn't like him, like the style of football that even Dennis Bergkamp is known for, like he's like technically really good, right? Like probably one of the best technical player ever in EPL. Um, that's how I ended up liking. And in terms of loyalty, right? It's like, okay, I chose a team back then, but like, why do we keep on following the same team? Like, why don't we switch over? Oh, like all of a sudden, then Chelsea came out of nowhere, right? And it's like, why don't we switch to Chelsea? Because now
Mhm.
Chelsea is the team to follow. And then after a while, it became Manchester City. Um, I think it is the
I
nature
know
of
why that is. I
Why?
give you
Why is
because
that?
you don't want to call Deutsche
No,
Ure.
no, no. It's not.
That's why
No,
you don't
no,
want to change.
no. I think,
uh,
I think, Utsab, I just want to interject for a second.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
That's what I was gonna try to bring, because we were teenagers, and that's something like we were associated with passion. And the reason I'm saying that is like, like, we
Yeah.
we've watched NFL over the years, but we don't have like that core belief system or like a team that we're associated with. I'm a big Broncos fan,
Mm.
but if you ask me, like Broncos and Arsenal, I'm more leaning towards Arsenal because that's what I've grown up to. That's been part of me since I was a youth or a teenager. I think that is part of the reason, and that's where I invested most of my emotions. And I do
So
try to.
maybe our brain was plastic at that time, and that might have played that part then.
I think part of, as I'm thinking, it also helped me, and I think it might be same for others as well, is that when I came to the US in 2003, that became sort of a glue for a lot of our international students. So we would talk about EPL, we would watch
Yeah,
EPL, right? And we would discuss EPL. So we had friends from, Kenya,
yeah,
uh, from Spain, right? Like everybody, like that was the common theme was like EPL, like whose team
Yeah.
is doing good.
yeah.
So there is that piece, right? And I think that's why I stuck with Arsenal. But also I feel that for me, Arsenal, and I'm thinking about the identity and how we are saying, oh, like it has evolved over time, but that fandom to Arsenal has always stayed constant, right? Like no matter what other things are changing, that has become like a constant thing. And for me, Arsenal represents, I don't know, just, I think Arsenal does the football the right way. Over the years, we've seen the Wenger era. We moved from Highbury to Everett. And regardless of all the controversies and, accusations of, bottling the league or not doing well, I think we have done the football right way, right? We have not overspent. We have always watched our spending. We have always went for players that we felt like added value. So, so it just felt Arsenal was doing the right thing all the time. So that's how I became an Arsenal fan, and that's how it became a part of my identity. Right? Obviously, it started with what Monish and Utsav said that yeah, like it was the late '90s and the early Arsene Wenger eras, the silky football. But what made us stay, or at least me, through that misery, I called it the misery years, right? Post 2005 up until now, is that we've always done it the right way. And I don't know. It just feels home.
And
I'm gonna.
maybe that aligns with our values, right? We're
Yep.
ethical people who likes to do the things the right way.
As
Oh,
I'm
But
listening,
I'm really curious to hear about Biswas's opinion on this, though, right? Like, because you don't have a team
so
that
you
you have been
guys have
following.
given me the answer. Actually, I'm going to
Yeah,
talk about that. So,
yeah,
I think going back to what Manish mentioned, maybe the reason I don't have any club association is because in the '90s when I was a teenager, that I didn't watch any EPL. I
yeah,
didn't watch. At that time, actually, I was watching more cricket than I was watching club football. So for me, football was always World Cup. So that I would watch religiously, and I always supported Argentina. And like Utsav said, I guess half of Nepal is Argentina, half of Nepal is Germany and Brazil. Those are the three teams we supported, I think, as a country. And so I started watching EPL or caring about EPL after I came to college, like Umid mentioned earlier. Because you guys, Utsab, Ashish, and I don't know, Rishabh and all, you guys talked about Champions League. That time we used to get Champions League on Wednesday afternoon in, I don't know,
yeah,
some local network, right?
yeah.
One of those networks. So that's how I was. I mean, I knew about EPL and club football. It's not that I didn't know, but that's when I actually I was reintroduced, okay, let's say. But since then I just supported Chelsea because I don't know, I used to take Chelsea as a team when I played FIFA on my computer. That's why I
man,
chose
when did
Chelsea
Chelsea
actually.
come, man? We never heard about this Chelsea thing.
Yeah, and then that's why Utsav always tells me that I used to be a Chelsea fan, but that was
Yeah,
not because I watched the game, nothing like that. It's just I picked Chelsea for FIFA game that I used to play in PC back in the days. And then so I guess and then I know that in 2008 or 9 I remember, so this is something why I stopped again watching EPO was, so Chelsea and Barcelona were playing Champions League final, I think 2008 2009, and then Chelsea was leading 2-0, and then in the end Barcelona scored like 3-2 and then won the game. Or maybe Chelsea won next year, something like that. And then once they won the game, I felt, what am I getting? They won, my team won this Chelsea, they won the cup. And I felt that I didn't get anything from watching them. They won, they celebrated, but I didn't get anything. I don't know, it might be sound selfish, but that's how I felt. And I stopped watching. I mean, I stopped caring about football after that. But then again, now back, I mean, I don't know, fast forward 2016, 2017, we came up with this EPL fantasy, and I joined that group not because of football. I joined that group because I played that EPL fantasy because I wanted to be in touch with you guys, and that I thought was a common thing that could keep me in touch with my high school friends and my college friends, and that's why I joined. And now I'm getting like, I mean, I'm into it, but still I can't have one team. I don't know why. I just, but I like Liverpool, Arsenal, Man U, and
You just like
Chelsea.
everyone.
every team
That's just
that
like,
plays
oh
well,
man.
I like. And I know you guys hate that. And I actually yesterday when I was researching about this identity, and there was a mention of football identity, and how the like hardcore fans hate fans like me, that I chase. I mean, I don't have any
Man, you are a
particular team,
chameleon.
and
That's
then
what you are.
maybe
Chameleon.
in this case, yes, right. In this
How
case,
can you
I am.
like Liverpool and Man United at the same time is just crazy.
Because
But
I don't know the history, I guess.
He's
Maybe
super
that's why.
chameleon. That's what he
and
is.
and for
I,
our listeners and viewers, our producer Subin Shrestha is a big Liverpool fan, and he's dying to come in and say his
I
piece.
think
I just wanted to let everybody know.
Suvin should chime in. I don't know why he's staying silent. It's
So as you guys, so that was part of me about what Utsav asked. But then I had this thing in my mind, as you guys were saying, when Mani said that my identity, his identity changed over the years,
yeah.
and however, Umit mentioned that my identity as a gunner never changed. So this is a good. I mean, this is something I thought about. Is it safe to say that when it comes to identity, we can change the identity if we want and not change if we don't want it? Is that safe to say? What do you
I,
guys think
I I
about that?
think so. It depends on like some of the
So the
things.
reason I asked, I'll mention it after you guys chime in into this. But I'm going towards the identity politics. So here, say let's say in India, people right now, I mean, I see in India that people are seeing themselves as Hindu country. That's how they want to portray to the world, and
Mhm.
that's what at least the Western media says, that in India there's all this religious or religion politics is going on after the rise of Modi, right? So and then there, and then same here in the United States, we have race related politics, I mean identity politics going on, like white versus rest of the world, or immigrant versus the natives. So, and we see, or I used to see it as, okay, so once you see yourself as a Hindu or a white person or a native I mean American who've been living here versus non-immigrant versus immigrant, I used to think, or before this discussion, that it sticks to us. But after the conversation, this discussion we have, this is something new that I'm learning, that actually, no, we can actually pick and choose the identity, right? So if we see ourselves as a Hindu in at first, then at some point we can actually change our identity to something else, as global religious person or whatever. And then also, but at the same time, if we don't want to change our identity, like Umid doesn't want to change or didn't change his Gunnar identity, then it sticks to us and we hold on to it. So that's where I'm trying to go. So I'll stop. I'll let you
I
guys
think
chime in.
it's different based on different groups maybe that you associate with, because you associating with a gender group, man, let's say, that's something very hard to change over time, versus you know you associate with a certain country,
Hmm.
and you maybe don't spend as much time in that country. It's a different factor, right? It's like a gender group versus a country group versus a soccer group, because we associate ourselves with so many different groups. Somehow
Yes.
we want to associate with a group. Maybe that's just a phenomenon of humans, that
No,
you
no.
want to
This I
associate with a
I
group.
researched yesterday,
Um,
and it is actually our innate. That's innate in us, that we want to associate with something, so that it provides us that sense of
right.
belonging and pride. So
Yeah, and then whenever you associate yourself with the group, right, the group mentality is always yes, you are getting something like out of the group, but you have to be loyal to the group, right? Like if you are not loyal to the group, like how can you be in that group? You have to have certain loyalty in there.
Mm,
Um, and
Uh,
over time, no loyalty.
I mean, I
Um,
mean, like for certain things, right? You might be supporting one thing for one reason. I might be supporting the same thing for other reason. There is some kind of loyalty, but there is not like blind loyalty or anything. I have my own value system. Because of that, I'm supporting one thing, and you might be have another value
but
system.
like when you say support, that's not like when we say identity, isn't it more like not just supporting, but you associate yourself with that group, right? Like because your values align, you it's not just like I just support Arsenal
Yeah,
because they are playing attractive football
No,
and I don't care
I
about
mean
them,
just
right?
yeah,
just
that
within Arsenal team, like Arsenal supporter, you have like mixed people, right, with a different value system that support Arsenal.
I think we're gonna have that in every group, right?
Yeah,
But what again? There is a term in sociology,
nice.
and we call it
Educate us,
we call it
educate us,
we
Umit.
we call it we call it in group versus out group, right? And in group is a social group to which a person they sort of psychologically identify as being a member, right? So then your value systems align, and then your out group is where you don't identify yourself as part of that group, right? So your in group, for example, would be Arsenal, right? So
Yeah,
your values kind of align.
uh-huh.
But again, like what you said, Manish, not everybody's going to agree with 100% of what everybody else says. But there is sort of, you subscribe to the same identity. You can change those in groups and out groups, right, over the years. So I think once you subscribe to that group, then you sort of take on that identity and you find similar thinking people, and then and I'm pretty sure they will influence your identity as well.
Yeah, to a certain extent,
So
yeah. But I think from political standpoint, or uh, I think we our value system changes over time. So maybe because of that, we are not inherently associated with one. I'm just speaking on my behalf, that I'm associated with like a one identity or one group, because my value system changes over, not my value system, but the way I think about certain things, certain topic changes over time as I grow. So
Hmm.
like on some of these topics, at least for me, I just as I mature or as I grow, I think I'm changing the way I associate it with things, and that's a natural transition for all of us on some of these topics. That's my thought.
Yeah, but interesting like how we have certain groups, right? Like even in politics, like either the political party or the religious party, right? Like religion basically, Hinduism versus Buddhism versus Christianity. You're, I guess, in a way, your thoughts can evolve where you can come out of that particular religion, right? You may have associated with that religion because of, you grew up in that religion, you went to, the temples or followed the tradition, but over time, maybe you get exposed to books or you talk to friends or like your thoughts evolve and you move over to the atheist or agnostic column, right? Um, but and even in political parties, there's always like, especially in US, right? Like we have Democrats and the Republicans, basically just two parties to choose from, and there's always this struggle with, I think maybe most of us, that I don't totally believe on everything that the Democrats say, totally don't believe in the what Republicans say. I want like a third party that's like a mix of this and this, right? Um, but somehow I don't know why there's just two or three political system. Maybe it's easier in terms of the if we have, I don't know, like, but certain countries definitely have more than more than three. But like in the US, you know, I don't know how the system did not evolve, right, to more than two or three, or what the founders were thinking when they said we only need two different groups. And there's like all these. I mean, people have evolved, right? The way that they think has evolved, but we can't choose a group. There's only three groups.
I think it's about perception, right? And where I'm going with this is previously, and I say previously because before, like a few years back, you could be a moderate, you could be ultra right or left wing, whatever, right? Like there used to be a level. But now, what I've seen in terms of identity is that if you support the Democrat, then you're a liberal. If you're supporting Republicans, you're conservative,
Yeah,
right? There's no middle ground.
exactly.
And right, what Manish was saying earlier, like even within an Arsenal fan, like you have a varying different opinions, right? But somehow we have landed in a space here in the US that if you subscribe to a party, then you are like hardcore, like you're perceived. I'm
You're
not saying that you
typecasted,
do it,
right?
but yeah, you're typecasted in a way that you're like, oh, you are right wing, right? So you should be doing this, like, or you would be supposed to be doing this. If you're a left, then you're doing this. And I think somehow that conversation has changed in the past 4 or 5 years, and we have sort of said, oh, like we are putting people in boxes. I think, to your point, yeah, go ahead,
I
Manish.
think I think it's. I mean, we might be jumping into some controversial topic, but I think it's the way like media is feeding information to us, right? And I think the media is dictating how like people in masses think. I think that is what has changed in last 6 7 years. Because I mean, before, and this is just my observation. I might be wrong. Like before, like media were pretty impartial, but now there's like a there's no like a middle ground media. You're either too left or too right. And even the the newsreader and the people who are writing the articles, they're they're putting their personal opinion, or there's like a personal biasness, that's being portrayed in what they're saying or writing. And because of that, like people like us who intake that information, our value system and belief system are also swayed, because if you continuously feed on the same information, you're naturally inclined to change your opinion. I think that is what is happening. And just
So for
nowadays.
me, I don't think there was no bias in the media in the past. There was always a
Yeah,
bias in
yeah.
the media. I mean, we are human beings and we always choose a side, like Utsav mentioned, like we want to be associated with a group. So we media always did that. And but I think what is on the rise right now is media feeding to that I like particular one identity, right? So if you are a Democrat, then these all these liberal medias are feeding you information what a Democrat likes. And then similarly, conservative media, Fox News, they are feeding news, always talking about all these conservative news or what is important for the conservatives. They are feeding that. I think that had changed
Yeah, exactly.
than media being a biased, right?
Yeah,
And then so now I think we are segueing to the next thing, that why is that, like, in the past that was not the case when it comes to news or media, or even the politicians. They tried to cater to the broad mass, right? They were
Hmm.
speaking not just for the liberals or for the conservative. They always try to find a middle ground where more liberals and conservative come together and then or unite. That used to be the case, but now it seems that uh, it, it 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 sells. I'm sure these politicians and medias are not just doing that because they like it, but because that's what is selling. So now my next question, or like, or what I wanted to think about a little bit or discuss about a little bit, is why that is the case. Like, why now that we are catering to just one identity, while we all of us here agree that it is not, we are not just one, we're not just one thing, we are like various things, right? Even within a party, like Utsav mentioned earlier, that Democrats have certain views that we may not like, and Republicans or conservatives have certain views that we may like. But even then, we all know that. But at the same time, this identity politics of liberals versus conservative, Hindu versus Islam, or Christian versus Islam, why is that on the rise? Why
I
is that
I
selling, let's
think
say?
I think the world has shifted from globalization to more like inclusivity, just catering towards their own people, and I think that's the geopolitical change that is happening. That's just my observation, and maybe
Yeah,
this is a
but
cycle,
that
right?
is definitely, yeah, that's definitely happening. But why, right?
It's like
Why is,
everything
because
everything
like,
everything goes through the cycle, right? And before there was Second World War and post Second World War, there was this like a long uh, tradition of like
Mhm.
globalization. Now maybe that cycle is changing. I don't know why for sure, but just the world moves in cycle. Maybe part of the reason is like we're
So
transitioning from that.
I want to say one thing before I forget, and I think to your question, Bishwas, I think as the consumption of media has changed over time, and I don't think that media is feeding right or left. Now I think we see media popping up that caters to both sides. So and again, this goes into the analytics. This goes into the way we identify and we consume social media, that we are being fed certain type of news, right? So, for example, if I'm liking someone's page on Instagram or on Facebook, and I'm doing certain things, like I'm gonna be shown news and things that are that the whatever the computer, I don't want to say computer, but uh, the uh,
Algorithm.
the, the algorithm, yeah, thank you, that believes, oh, like Omit might want to see this because Omit likes this, right? And somehow that has
yeah.
pigeonholed us, right? In the sense, oh, like this person would like this. And then we tend to be in this sort of an echo chamber where
Mm.
we are thinking of certain things, and then we are seeing the same thing on social media, whether it's on a Facebook, on an Instagram, and we're like, and it validates, right? Saying, oh, like I'm right because I'm seeing this, and I see a lot of different folks commenting on things like that. So I think there's definitely a shift there in the way we get news, the way we consume and digest news. I think
So
there has
that
been.
means we are blaming social media and Facebook and
I'm
Instagram
not
for what's
blaming.
happening.
I'm not
Not the
blaming. I
same.
don't think I'm putting a blame, but I think there's certainly a discussion that needs to happen,
Mm,
right?
mm,
Yeah, I guess
Because
we're in a bubble basically,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Of like, we associate with a group, and like basically we're just interacting with that group all the time.
yep,
And
mm,
when we hear something from the, I think you call it out group versus in group, the out
yep,
group, and it's kind of shocking, right? Like when we
yep.
hear about, let's say we live in the urban area, we hear something that the people in rural area are demanding, and we're like, what are they talking about, right?
Hmm.
Like they're so stupid, or like it just feels shocking, right? Like it's very like, why are they thinking that way? Which I don't know. Like even before social media, though, I would have thought, like less interaction between the group, because there was, basically a different form of media, which was just TV news. And
Hmm.
then you're still kind of, talking to people around your area, and like there was still that. But I don't know if it's being amplified by social media, right? Where you are doing more interaction with more like-minded people, not only in your region, but like, it could be, within the country, it could be like five different states. Now
Yep.
your population of you're interacting with your like-minded people has grown,
Hmm.
and it kind of reinforces that even more, I
Yep.
guess. The more you
mm.
interact, and people are emboldened, and like, now they
Yep.
want things in a certain way. So that's definitely what's probably happening. And going back to the topic of, I guess, deglobalization, right? Like we are seeing this trend of,
Yeah,
uh,
I was
yeah,
also
it's like
going to
there's
go
more
back to that.
nationalism.
Exactly.
Mhm.
People are more patriotic for
Hmm.
some reason, and it's probably because of, I guess, globalization definitely benefited a lot of people, right? Corporations, definitely a lot of people as well, where maybe the goods were cheaper for us to buy because there was more efficiency in the world economy. But there were definitely groups that were hurt by globalization, right? Like in America,
The
because
manufacturing, right?
we're outsourcing cheap labor, right, to China, Mexico, and there's like a certain group, the blue collar group, that has been affected the most.
Exactly.
And they are basically, I think over time it's kind of been growing and growing, like they're discontent to that. And um
No, you're bringing a very good topic, and because of that, there's a nationalistic
yeah, yeah, yeah.
sentiment that's on the rise because
Yeah,
when
that's what's happened. Yeah, it's like certain
I
groups that
totally
are,
agree with
yeah, that
that
have been
because
they affected, and they are kind of rising up, and that's kind of causing, like the people in politics, right? If there's enough population, they will cater to that, and I think that's what the politicians are also kind of utilizing that discontent with like globalization to kind of grow their popularity,
mm,
and that's kind of been on the rise. Uh,
sometimes I feel like the reason we are like this is because we are the product of globalization, as in we benefited from the globalization. And and because of that we have a certain viewpoint, or the way we look at the world is different than the people who are suffering, and that's why we don't agree with them, because we are the ones who benefited from the globalization. Sometimes I think that's what's also
no,
happening.
but we also listen to them. I mean, we don't necessarily
No, we listen to them, but then I don't think we fully agree with them, right?
like. It
I don't
depends.
think
It
we fully
depends. I
agree. And
mean,
same way, they don't fully agree with us because they are, like Utsav said, they are, what was it, disenfranchised because of the
yeah,
globalization, and
yeah,
we are not.
yeah, no, no, we are not.
yeah. I mean,
We are not. But at the same time, I mean, their voices need to be heard, and what they're saying is also like somebody needs to listen to that, right? I mean, we are a product of globalization, that's true, but just the way like it's a natural like human progression, right? If people don't listen to you or your voices isn't being heard, then there's just going to be like a natural like a revolt, right? And that's what seems to be happening all over the world um, because the politicians are more catering towards like other things than what's in their house. And when there are people who are like politicians who are listening to that voice or even willing to listen to that voice, then they feel like there's someone who's listening to them. So I think that's what is happening like globally, because globally, like the native citizens feel like they are they're not being heard. That's just my observation.
Yeah, actually, you bring a good point. So, we've been talking about identity, and then now we kind of went into the problem that is that identity, or having a single identity, is creating around the world. So, I mean, since we are discussing it, we can't just say there's a problem. So we should discuss a little bit about the solution also. So we are going towards that. I hear from all of you that one thing I picked is we have to listen, right? Or the exposure. So if we listen to each other, then maybe we can, not hate each other, even though we are from in group and out group. That's the term I learned today. And also, and this is something that we all talked about, that we're not just one identity. We are like, we have different identities. So if people can just somehow see each other, so let's say if I'm a Democrat versus a conservative, people can find a common ground in maybe sports or music. If you are a Swifties, then like you can have a common ground in that sense. Or if you are a Gooner, then you can have a common ground in that. So for me, it seems that two things we can do is like, one is listen to each other. Second is finding other identities, meaning let's not just see ourselves as just one thing, but there are different ways to identify ourselves. That's what I see. And if you guys
Yeah,
wanna
no,
add to that,
just to add to that, it's about listening to the different voice, right? If someone doesn't agree to you, that then that doesn't mean you don't completely, lambast their thought process. You just gotta listen to others' viewpoint. I mean, you can internalize it as, that's not something that you can agree with, but you can also process it like, okay, there are the other people who think differently than you, so you need to be aware of that. And I always try to say, like, there's not always a right one way, right? There's from point A to point B, right? You can go either through the straight line, or you can go through the like curved line, or there's different paths. So it's a similarly, right? Like, different people have different viewpoints, and you just gotta respect their viewpoint. You might not completely agree with them, or or associate with them, but you just need to be aware, like, there are other people who have different viewpoints, and I'm not just gonna disregard their viewpoints. That's the main thing, that I think.
I think we need to, I agree with everything that's being said. What I would add to that is respect, and be respectful of one another. I know it's a hard ask, because if you are, so again, this goes back to this idea around, where we think, oh, if people subscribe to certain thing, then we kind of pigeonhole them and say, oh,
Exactly.
like, because you do this, you do that, then I think you should be this. I think there needs to be a respect factor that needs to come in, and not use people as pawns, man. Like, that's what I go back to thinking, like, whenever I think of politics, because I do think that people are being used as pawns, right? In this big game. So that's what I would say. But I agree with everything that's been said so far here.
Yeah, I just thought about this, and it's like the buyer's behavior, right? When we shop, right? Like, just because we use Amazon rigorously, that doesn't mean we buy everything from Amazon. Sometimes we do price check. We might buy from Walmart, we might buy from Overstock, whatever. Depending on the things that we want, we buy from different channels. It's the similarly with our way we think about things. It can change. We cannot be pigeonholed, like, to just uh, one one group, or one tribe, or one identity, because our our identity change, depend on the way we think, way we look at things. We cannot just be pigeonholed into the one. It's, I mean, case in point, like the way we buy things, it's not always the same, at least for me. For some, like, who are like big into, like, I'm just going to buy from Amazon, maybe. But, like, there are also other peoples who can, who use different channels in the way they want. That's all.
Thanks, Monish, for actually this is good. So he connected the whole thing back to identity. Actually, that's what the topic of this podcast was. So that is, if Utsav has anything to conclude, I would give him some time. But otherwise, we are, I think, coming to a good conclusion here.
No,
And
I think I'm good. We are missing our community shield game right now. So I think, I mean, it was a great discussion, starting from identity to, like, money's connecting it all. In the end, I think we're good. Hopefully we can continue with more topics and more interesting topics, more interesting discussion with even more members in our second episode. So I'm really
yeah.
looking forward to that. I really want to thank all the audience who's gonna listen to this podcast. But yeah, besides, you take on, and why don't you just
No,
give
I
a
mean, you
closing
said
message?
everything. So I just want to say that thank you, everyone, for a good discussion. I learned a lot. And I want to add what I was thinking while we were having this discussion is this is not just a podcast for everyone to listen, but for me, I am here so that I can also learn something. And I think that would make it interesting as well for me. And I don't know, I guess it's same for all of you guys. So, and when Umit added about the theories in sociology. Actually, that's what I'm here for. It's not just me being in a
Learn new
podcast and
Yeah,
things.
talking.
Yeah,
Yes,
learn
learning
new
new
things.
things.
yeah.
That's what
And
we're.
I definitely am going away with few things like. our identity can change over time and the sociological theories and all. But I don't want to, I think I have said a lot, and I would like to end our discussion today. And thank you everyone for joining us, and whoever is listening, thank you for listening to us. And we may come up with some new interesting topic next week.
All
So
right.
bye
Thank
everyone,
you. Bye,
All
everyone.
right,
Right.
all
Thank you.
right.
Bye,
and
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone.
enjoy your
Bye.
community
Bye.
skills
Bye.
game. And may Arsenal win. Go
Yeah,
Gunners!
there we
Let's
go.
go. Let's go.